The sun was shining bright that morning, but for Muriel Crestfall, it felt heavy and cold. She stood at the old wooden table in the living room, holding the property papers in her hand. This was the house where she had lived for more than 30 years. It was where she and her late husband had raised Kaylin. It was where birthdays were celebrated, where they ate dinner together every night, where they laughed and cried. This house was her whole world, and today she was about to give it away. She looked at her son Kaylin. At 28, he was tall, broad-shouldered, with a confidence that sometimes felt more like arrogance. Muriel loved him more than anything. Since his father's death, she had worked extra shifts at the library, taken small sewing jobs, and done everything she could to keep the house safe for him. And now she thought it was time to let go. "Kaylin," she said softly, sliding the papers across the table. "I signed it. The house is yours now." For a moment, Kaylin just stared at the papers. Then a small smile spread across his face. Not the warm smile Muriel had hoped for, but something sharp, something that made her heart tighten. "So, it's finally mine?" he asked, picking up the papers. "Yes," Muriel said, trying to smile even though tears stung her eyes. "Your father would have wanted you to have it. You're the man of the house now." Kaylin leaned back in his chair and let out a short laugh. "Good, because it's time for some changes around here." Muriel frowned. "Changes?" He stood up and looked around the room like he was already redesigning it in his head. "Yeah, and first change, you need to pack your bags." Muriel blinked, unsure if she had heard him right. "What do you mean?" "You've done enough, Mom," he said casually, like he was talking about the weather. "You've been running this place for too long. It's my house now. You should go find somewhere quiet to live. Maybe a retirement place or something. I want to live here without someone watching me all the time." For a moment, Muriel couldn't move. Her whole body froze. She had imagined this moment so differently. Maybe Kaylin hugging her, maybe thanking her, maybe even crying with happiness. Instead, his words cut her like a knife. "You're asking me to leave?" she whispered. "I'm not asking," Kaylin said, his tone firm now. "I'm telling you. You've given me the house. So pack your bags, Mom." Muriel felt the air leave her lungs. She wanted to scream, to tell him how much she had sacrificed, to remind him of the nights she stayed awake working just to pay the mortgage. But no words came out. Her throat felt tight, and her eyes blurred with tears. Instead of arguing, she turned and walked to her bedroom. Every step felt heavier than the last. She took out a suitcase and began packing. Each dress she folded reminded her of the life she had lived in this house. She touched the bedpost one last time, remembering how her husband had carved their initials there on their first anniversary. When her suitcase was ready, she wheeled it to the front door. Kaylin stood in the hallway, his arms crossed, looking impatient. "I'll send you my new address," Muriel said quietly. "You do that," Kaylin replied, already turning back toward the living room. Muriel stepped outside, closing the door gently behind her. She stood on the porch for a moment, staring at the house. The curtains she had sewn herself still hung in the windows. The roses she had planted years ago were blooming in the front yard. Everything looked the same, but it no longer felt like home. She walked down the path, dragging her suitcase behind her. Each step away from the house felt like leaving a piece of her soul behind. By evening, Muriel found a small apartment across town. It was quiet, clean, but empty. No photographs on the wall, no laughter in the rooms, no warm memories. She sat on the edge of the bed and let the tears fall freely. She had given everything to her son, her love, her years, her house, and in return, he had asked her to leave. For the next few days, she kept to herself. She didn't call Kaylin. She didn't visit. She stayed silent, trying to make peace with the decision she had made. She told herself this was his house now, his responsibility, and maybe one day he would realize what he had done. But even in her quiet little apartment, she couldn't sleep. Every night she kept thinking, was I wrong to give him the house? Was I wrong to trust him so much? She stared at the empty ceiling, wondering if she had lost not just her home, but her son too. 3 nights had passed since Muriel Crestfall walked out of her own home with nothing but a suitcase. In her small apartment, the silence was heavy. She tried to cook simple meals, but the food tasted bland without the warm kitchen she once had. She tried to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw Kaylin's face, cold and proud, telling her to leave. On the 3rd night, just after midnight, Muriel finally drifted off on her bed. The room was dark, the faint hum of traffic outside the only sound. Suddenly, her phone rang. The sharp sound jolted her awake. She reached over with trembling hands, half asleep, half afraid. "Hello," her voice was rough with sleep. "Mom." The voice on the other end was broken, frantic. It was Kaylin. Muriel sat up immediately. Her heart raced. "Kaylin? What happened?" There was shouting and noise in the background. Sirens. A crackling sound she couldn't place. Then Kaylin's voice, shaking like a scared child. "The house, there was a fire. The living room is gone, Mom. I don't know what to do. Please, please come." Muriel's breath caught in her throat. She didn't even think twice. She threw on her coat, grabbed her car keys, and rushed out the door. Her heart pounded as she drove through the night, headlights cutting across empty streets. The city seemed quieter than usual, like the world was holding its breath with her. When she turned onto her old street, her chest tightened. Red and blue lights flashed across the night sky. Fire trucks lined the road. A crowd of neighbors stood outside, whispering, pointing. And there, in front of her beloved house, was chaos. Smoke poured out of the windows. The air smelled sharp, thick with burnt wood and ash. Firefighters sprayed water on the house, their shouts filling the night. Muriel parked her car and ran forward. Her eyes stung, not only from the smoke but from the sight of the home she had built being destroyed. Memories of birthdays, Christmas mornings, her husband fixing the leaky roof. All of it seemed to vanish in the rising smoke. On the porch sat Kaylin. His head was in his hands, his shoulders shaking. His once confident face looked pale, almost childlike. When he saw her, he stumbled to his feet and rushed over. "Mom!" he cried, his voice cracking. He grabbed her arm like he was drowning. "I'm sorry. I didn't know what to do. I thought I could handle everything, but now, the house, it's ruined." Muriel looked at him, her chest tight. For a moment, the mother in her wanted to hold him, to tell him everything would be okay. But then she remembered how easily he had thrown her out, the coldness in his voice as he said, "Old woman, pack your bags and leave." Her eyes filled with tears, but she stayed strong. "Kaylin, this is your house now," she said softly, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "You told me to leave. You told me it was yours." Kaylin's lips trembled. "I didn't mean it like that. I thought I was ready, but look at me. I can't do this without you. Please, Mom, help me." The firefighters shouted something, pulling another hose closer. Water splashed across the blackened walls. Sparks hissed and died. Neighbors watched quietly, some whispering about how the son had kicked his mother out only days ago. Muriel heard it too. The shame on Kaylin's face showed he heard it as well. She took a slow breath, staring at the charred windows, the broken pieces of her past. Then she turned her eyes back to Kaylin. "I can't step into that house again, Kaylin," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "Not after what you said to me. This is yours now. Your burden. Your responsibility." Kaylin's eyes widened. He grabbed her hand tighter. "Please, Mom. Don't leave me like this. I was stupid. I thought I didn't need you, but I do. I can't do this alone." Muriel pulled her hand free gently. Her heart ached, every instinct screaming to comfort her son, but she forced herself to stand tall. "You'll learn," she whispered. "You have to." Kaylin stared at her, speechless, his mouth opening and closing like he had words but couldn't say them. For the first time in his life, he had no power, no control. He was just a boy who had pushed away the one person who would have never abandoned him. Muriel turned away, her coat brushing against the smoke-filled air. She walked back to her car slowly, each step heavier than the last. She didn't look back, even though she could hear Kaylin sobbing behind her, calling out, "Mom, don't go, please." She sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her chest felt like it was breaking apart, but she told herself this was the only way he would ever understand. If she fixed everything for him now, he would never grow, never realize what it meant to take responsibility. As the engine roared to life, she caught one last glimpse of the house in the rearview mirror. Smoke still rose into the dark sky like a shadow of everything she had lost. And on the porch, her son knelt on the ground, broken in a way he had never been before. Muriel drove away, the taste of ash still in her mouth, her heart both shattered and strong at the same time. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing. Kaylin had just learned the hardest lesson of his life. Kaylin sat on the porch long after the fire trucks left. The street grew quiet, but inside him, there was only noise, shame, guilt, and fear crashing together. His neighbors had seen it all. They saw the firefighters save what little was left. They saw his mother come and then walk away. And they knew. Everyone knew. The house was half burned, its windows black with soot, the walls smelling of smoke. But what hurt Kalen more was the emptiness he felt inside. For the first time in his life, he realized how much he had depended on his mother. She had always been the one who fixed things, who paid the bills, who cooked, who kept everything in order. Without her, he felt like a child lost in the dark. The next morning, he called her again. His voice was desperate. "Mom, please. I don't know how to start. The insurance people, the money, the repairs. I can't handle it alone. Come back. Help me, just for a while." There was silence on the line. He could almost hear her breathing. Then Muriel's voice came, soft but steady. "Kalen, you told me to leave. You told me this was your house. Now you must take care of it." "Mom, I was angry. I didn't mean it. Please don't leave me like this," he begged. But she didn't answer. The line clicked. She had hung up. Kalen dropped the phone on the table and buried his face in his hands. He had thought his mother would forgive him instantly, like she always had when he was younger. But this time was different. This time she had drawn a line. Over the next few days, Kalen tried to manage. He called the insurance company, but they asked for documents he didn't even know existed. He spoke to contractors about repairs, but the costs were more than he could afford. Bills piled up. The weight grew heavier. At night, he couldn't sleep. The smell of smoke clung to his clothes, his hair, everything. He sat in the burned living room with a blanket wrapped around him, staring at the ashes where their family photos once hung. He remembered being a little boy, running to his mom when he was scared of the dark. Back then, she always came. But now she was gone, and he was left alone with his mistakes. One evening, unable to take it anymore, Kalen went to see her. He stood outside her small apartment, holding his breath. When Muriel opened the door, she looked tired but calm. Her eyes softened when she saw him, but her body didn't move to welcome him inside. "Mom," Kalen's voice cracked. He looked smaller now, like the proud young man had vanished and only the lost boy remained. "I can't do this. I thought I was ready, but I wasn't. I threw you out, and now I'm begging you to come back. Please fix this for me." Muriel looked at him for a long moment. She wanted to pull him close, to erase all the pain. But she remembered the night he had thrown her out, how his words had cut her deeper than any wound. And she remembered the fire, the way he had begged her to return. This was the moment she had to choose, to protect him again or to let him face his own mistakes. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm but firm. "Kalen, listen to me. I have spent my whole life fixing things for you. When your father died, I carried everything on my shoulders so you could grow. I gave you this house, hoping you would honor it. Instead, you threw me out, and now you want me to clean your mess. But I won't." Kalen's eyes widened. You won't." She shook her head slowly. "No. This is your house, your responsibility. You wanted me gone, and I respected that. Now you must respect it too. You will fix this yourself." Kalen felt like the ground had been pulled from under him. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. His mother's voice wasn't angry. It was calm, almost sad. And that hurt more than if she had shouted. "But I can't," he whispered. His voice was shaking. "I'm not like you. I'm not strong enough." Muriel stepped closer, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She touched his arm lightly and said, "You will be. You have no choice now." Kalen stood frozen as she pulled her hand back and closed the door gently. Outside the apartment, the night was cold. He sat on the steps for a long time, staring at the stars, feeling like a child who had just lost everything. But deep inside, something began to shift. His mother's words replayed in his head. "This is your house. You must take care of it." For the first time, Kalen realized this wasn't just punishment. It was a lesson, a painful, necessary lesson. The next morning, he forced himself to try again. He gathered the documents, called the insurance company, met with the contractors. It wasn't easy. Every step felt like climbing a mountain. But little by little, he pushed forward. At night, when exhaustion overcame him, he thought of his mother. He thought of her strength, her sacrifices. And slowly, he began to understand the weight of what she had carried all those years. The weeks that followed were the hardest Kalen Stravik had ever faced. Every morning, he woke up to the smell of smoke in the air, a constant reminder of the fire. His house stood half-burned, covered in ash, windows broken, walls blackened. He used to walk around with pride, calling it his house. Now it felt like a burden pressing down on him. At first, he tried to run away from the problems. He sat for hours staring at the bills, the insurance forms, the letters from contractors. His friends stopped visiting after the fire. Neighbors no longer greeted him warmly. Many of them whispered about how he had thrown his own mother out just days before disaster struck. Kalen heard the whispers, and each one pierced him like a knife. But his mother's voice stayed in his mind. "This is your house now. You must take care of it." Slowly, Kalen began to act. He forced himself to call the insurance company again and again until they approved part of the claim. He met contractors, listened carefully, and tried to understand what needed to be done. He sold some of his personal things, his gaming console, his motorbike, to gather money for repairs. Every choice felt painful, but each one taught him something about sacrifice. At night, he couldn't sleep. He lay awake in the cold upstairs room that hadn't been touched by the fire, staring at the ceiling. He remembered his childhood, his mother working double shifts to pay bills, her tired hands cooking dinner, her smile even when she was exhausted. He remembered being carried in her arms when he had nightmares. And now he saw everything clearly. She hadn't just given him a house. She had given him her whole life. And he had thrown it back at her. One evening, Kalen stood in front of the bathroom mirror. His face looked older, more tired. He barely recognized himself. And for the first time, he whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom." But saying it to the empty room wasn't enough. He knew he had to say it to her face. The next day, Kalen walked across town to his mother's small apartment. His heart pounded as he knocked on the door. When Muriel Crestfall opened it, she looked surprised to see him. She was wearing her simple cardigan, her hair pulled back, her eyes calm but watchful. Kalen lowered his head like a guilty child. "Mom," his voice broke. "I came to say I'm sorry. For everything. For throwing you out, for not respecting you, for not realizing what you did for me all these years. I thought I was strong. I thought owning the house made me a man. But I was wrong. I was selfish. And when the fire came, I realized, I can't even stand without you." Muriel's eyes softened. She had waited so long to hear these words. For weeks, she had prayed that her son would learn, that he would see the truth. And now, finally, he did. Tears filled her eyes as she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. For a moment, Kalen froze. Then he held her tight, like he was afraid she would disappear. "I forgive you," Muriel whispered. "But Kalen, remember this. Forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. You broke my heart. But you've grown, and that is what matters." Kalen pulled back, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I'll never hurt you like that again. I promise." Muriel nodded. "Then show me. Don't just say it, prove it." The next morning, Muriel visited the house with him. She hadn't seen it since the night of the fire. Standing before the burned walls, her chest tightened. But when she looked at her son, she saw something new in his eyes: humility, responsibility, pain, but also determination. Together, they walked through the house. The living room was charred black. The old family photos had been destroyed. But Kalen didn't complain. He showed her the repair plans, explained what the contractors had said, and admitted how difficult it had been. For the first time, Muriel smiled. She saw that her son was finally beginning to understand what it meant to build a life. As they stood by the broken window, sunlight streaming through the empty frame, Kalen looked at her and said softly, "This time, Mom, I don't want you to fix it for me. I want to fix it with you, side by side." Muriel's heart swelled. That was the moment she knew her son had truly changed. The neighbors watched them from across the street, whispering again. But this time, the whispers were different. They saw a young man who had been broken, and a mother who had stood firm until he learned his lesson. They saw a family once divided, finding its way back together. In the days that followed, Kalen worked harder than ever before. He repaired what he could, saved money, and involved his mother in every decision. He no longer treated her as someone to push aside, but as a partner, a guide, and above all, his mother. One night, as they sat on the porch together, Muriel looked at him and said quietly, "You finally know what it means to have a home. Not just walls and a roof, Kalen. A home is love, respect, and responsibility." Kalen nodded, his eyes shining. "And I'll never forget it, Mom. Never again." The house would take months to fully restore. But for Muriel, the true restoration had already happened, in her son's heart. And for Kalen, the lesson he had once ignored would stay with him forever. The value of family, sacrifice, and respect, learned the hardest way possible.